I remember the exact moment the pen left his hand. Ryan Kessler, our new CFO, had just scrawled his signature across the bottom of the leadership transition agreement without so much as glancing at page 7. He leaned back in the leather chair of the corner office on the 32nd floor of Vanguard Financial Group's headquarters in downtown Chicago. That half-smirk playing on his lips like he'd just closed another venture round instead of rewriting 2 decades of safeguards. 22 years I had spent at Vanguard. Eleanor Voss, controller, the woman who built the invisible fences that kept millions from slipping through cracks. I knew every ledger line, every reconciliation protocol, every triple check that turned potential disasters into footnotes. But the board had decided we needed fresh energy. Ryan arrived from a fast-growing fintech startup in Austin with his slim-fit suits, no sock loafers, and a vocabulary full of words like agile, disrupt, and move fast. He called our control binders relics from the fax machine era. That first week, he summoned me to review his draft of the executive transition protocols. "Ellie, just put your magic touch on this before legal finalizes it," he said, sliding the folder across the mahogany desk. I read it carefully, twice, while he tapped away on his phone. Then I asked if he had time to discuss the amendment language on fiduciary continuity. He laughed. "Fine print is for lawyers who bill by the hour. This is about momentum. Sign here if you're good." I didn't argue. I simply made one small but precise addition to Clause 12b, buried deep in the section on operational uncertainty. In the event of material internal control failures, repeated policy bypasses without board approval, or significant discrepancies in financial reporting during leadership transition, temporary fiduciary and voting authority would revert to the immediately preceding controller for a review period not exceeding 90 days or until full audit clearance. It was worded tightly, legally sound, notarized later that afternoon, and filed with copies sent quietly to legal and the board secretary. Ryan never read it. He signed the final version that same day, initialed only the summary page, and handed it back with a wink. "We're building the future, Ellie. No need to dwell on the past." I smiled, that tight smile I'd perfected over decades, the one that hid the quiet calculation. Retirement had been on my mind for months anyway. My house in Evanston was paid off, my pension secure, and I'd started spending weekends at a small cabin up in Wisconsin with my sister. But watching Ryan dismantle layer after layer of the systems I'd engineered felt like watching someone knock down a house brick by brick while calling it renovation. By my final month, the changes accelerated. He relaxed vendor payment thresholds, allowing approvals up to $300,000 on CFO discretion alone. Multi-level sign-offs became bottlenecks. Conflict of interest disclosures were labeled innovation killers. He reassigned the compliance officer to digital transformation metrics and brought in consultants who talked about real-time dashboards while ignoring open reconciliation gaps. I said nothing publicly. I packed my office quietly, wearing the same charcoal pantsuit from my first day when Vanguard had only 120 employees and we still reconciled payroll by hand. On my last afternoon, Ryan breezed past my desk with his Bluetooth earpiece in, carrying a green smoothie. "Big day. Huh? Don't be a stranger, Ellie. No party. No speech. Just a quick handshake and a gift card." I left behind a sealed envelope labeled Transition Continuity Final Amendment with a note, signed copy enclosed per request. Then I drove north on Lakeshore Drive, the city skyline shrinking in my rear view, feeling the weight of that clause settle like an anchor in still water. 2 weeks later, the first cracks appeared. My former assistant forwarded an all-department email from Ryan announcing new era protocols. Vendor payments under $300,000 now required only his digital signature, no audit trail needed. Expense policies were loosened to encourage bold spending. Deferred revenue checks were dismissed as old world drag. I saved every screenshot, every timestamped forward. Not out of spite, but out of habit, the same habit that once prevented a $3.1 million overpayment because of a transposed digit. Friends from the old team texted in hushed tones. He's purging the archive folders for simplicity. Q2 forecasts are off by 6 figures and no one's questioning it. He told audit to chill on the mid-year review. I responded with neutral emojis, saving everything in a secure folder on my personal laptop titled Continuity Notes. I wasn't building a case yet. I was simply preserving the record, waiting to see if the triggers would align. The company filings started showing footnotes that read like apologies. Data integrity review in progress. Revenue recognition models had trailing columns deleted without explanation. A 7-figure vendor contract was approved based on a slick pitch deck alone. I watched from my living room, coffee in hand, a 27-inch monitor displaying the public disclosures. The house of safeguards wasn't collapsing overnight, but the smoke alarms were being unplugged one by one. I felt no anger, only the patient certainty that comes from knowing exactly where the levers are. The calls started coming more frequently by the 3rd month after my departure. Linda from internal audit left a voicemail at 2 a.m. Ellie, are we supposed to pull historicals from backups because live systems are inconsistent? Eric, a senior analyst who'd survived the restructuring, sent an email with no subject line. You were right. No body. Just that sentence hanging there like a verdict. Ryan's single-point compliance initiative meant gutting oversight committees and replacing them with his hand-picked advisors who wore hoodies to board meetings and spoke about velocity over verification. I documented it all. The policy reversal on purchase order cutoffs without approval. The postponed Q3 audit citing bandwidth issues. The erasure of reconciliation folders that had balanced the books for 15 years. Every message, every leaked spreadsheet, every timestamp went into my growing archive. One evening, as rain pattered against my windows overlooking Lake Michigan, I reviewed the latest 10Q excerpt. Footnotes had vanished. Cross-verification signatures were missing. A $940,000 payment to a new vendor called Nexus Partners had bypassed every check. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, not panic, but the slow compression of evidence stacking like perfectly aligned dominoes. Meanwhile, Ryan was everywhere in the press. Interviews about modernizing legacy finance, podcasts where he joked about dinosaur protocols holding companies back. The board seemed charmed. Stock ticked upward on the narrative of agility. But behind the scenes, the rot spread. Analysts walked out after seeing formulas replaced by hard-coded guesses. The compliance lead was demoted to innovation liaison. Reconciliation logs lagged 3 weeks. Audit trails no longer matched transactional flows. I didn't intervene. I didn't warn anyone. I simply waited, sipping decaf in the quiet of my study, the city lights twinkling like distant warnings. The clause wasn't vengeance. It was insurance precise, enforceable, triggered only by the very behaviors Ryan dismissed as irrelevant. Material control failures, multiple unauthorized policy changes, reporting discrepancies, bypassed reviews. The triggers were lining up like stars in a constellation only I could see. For months in, the emergency calendar invite arrived. Q3 clarity session urgent. No one used the word crisis, but the tag said everything. At 7:15 a.m. the next Tuesday, my phone rang with an unknown Chicago number. Denise from the new compliance team sounded young and rattled. MS. Voss, I found something in the transition amendments. Your name is referenced in a fiduciary clause. Legal's reviewing it. Could you explain? I kept my voice steady, happy to clarify. In person would be best. The follow-up email came within the hour. BCC heavy. Subject line, Clause 12B review, former controller input requested. No one wrote mistake or panic, but the corporate politeness couldn't hide the tremor. I dressed in my old charcoal blazer, white blouse, and wedding band only, no makeup, no jewelry that could distract. The drive downtown felt shorter than expected, traffic cooperative as if the city itself held its breath. I parked in visitor spaces, walked through the lobby unrecognized, and pushed open the boardroom door at 11 o'clock sharp. 12 faces turned. Directors, legal counsel, Ryan at the head, Denise clutching a folder. I took the seat opposite Ryan. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Thanks for coming on short notice, Ellie. I opened my slim folder containing the laminated original. Clause 12b, I said, sliding it forward. Fiduciary oversight and temporary authority transfer during periods of material operational uncertainty. Ryan's brow furrowed. That's not. It's exactly what you signed, I interrupted calmly. April 17th. Your signature above mine. Notarized. Witnessed. Filed with legal and the board's secretary same day. The room went still. General counsel leaned in. Scanning. This appears binding. The chairman cleared his throat. Was this inserted in good faith? Yes, I replied. At the request of the outgoing controller. Reviewed. Included. And archived properly. Ryan shifted. We fast-tracked it for deadline pressure. I didn't. You signed a binding clause you never read, I said evenly. Silence settled. Thick and recognizing. The clause activated upon documented material breaches, repeated control bypasses, reporting issues, unauthorized changes, all of which had occurred. Temporary reversion to me until audit clearance. Ryan looked to legal. This is theoretical, right? Legally binding, counsel replied flatly. And the triggers appear matched. I open my thicker binder. Let's walk through the evidence. I place documents one by one. Policy reversals without approval. Reconciliation discrepancies. The unvetted software migration. The bypassed 7-figure payment. Each slide. Each time-stamped email. Each logged event constituted a trigger under the precise language. Ryan's voice rose. She doesn't even work here anymore. Counsel. The clause explicitly extends authority post-exit as a continuity safeguard. The chairman rubbed his temples. So, she oversees the CFO temporarily? Until verified controls are restored, I confirmed. By 3:01 p.m., the room had reconvened with additional board members dialing in from the coasts. Ryan looked sleepless. Collar open. Jaw working silently. The audit chair projected the clause on screen, one clean paragraph transferring authority in cases of significant control shifts. You can't seriously activate this based on paperwork, Ryan said, laughing nervously. The general counsel spoke slower. Per the signed amendment. Until clearance. Yes. Voss holds full proxy over fiduciary operations and governance voting. Ryan's face paled. The audit chair turned to me. Do you intend to invoke fully? Effective immediately, I said without hesitation. Papers rustled. Someone exhaled sharply. Ryan whispered, You're not serious. I met his eyes. I tried to explain the fine print mattered. I pulled the second binder, thick, divided, meticulously organized. First action, temporary financial operations freeze. No disbursements over $25,000 without dual sign-off. No new vendor contracts without audit review. All access logs preserved and isolated. Ryan jolted. You can't just... I can, I replied. And I am... I continued through the evidence, his May 18th email relaxing sign-offs on flagged accounts. The $940,000 payment to Nexus Partners with no contract file. The internal memo ignoring concerns about deleted archive folders. The directive postponing audit reviews. By the fifth document, sweat beaded on Ryan's forehead. An investor representative on Zoom unmuted. Documentation. All verified. Timestamped. Originals in secured archive, I said. The chairman nodded. Serious lapses. More than lapses, I continued. Misrepresentations. Negligence triggering the clause. Ryan pushed back his chair. This is personal. Vendetta. If it were personal, I said quietly, holding his gaze, I would have let the damage continue unchecked. Instead, I'm protecting the integrity we built. Silence followed like dust after impact. Another investor seconded, stepping aside. The board chair addressed Ryan. Take leave effective today. Ryan stood, papers scattering, fists clenched, then stormed out. No one followed. I adjusted the documents. This isn't personal. The company's financial health is. It's bleeding from avoidable wounds. I distributed the remaining binders, color-coded protocols for triage, restoring compliance, isolating risks, rebuilding verification layers. This stops the bleeding, I told the chairman. Implement starting tomorrow morning. Actually Thursday. The wounds are fresh. Someone handed me a pen, Ryan's silver clicktop. I signed the final protocol page with steady strokes, left the pen on the table, and stood outside. The air smelled of impending rain. I walked steadily to my car. The echo of heels the only sound in the hallway as PR tried and failed to intercept. Let them spin memos. I'd already written the binding words. That week, Ryan's nameplate disappeared quietly. The internal memo cited temporary leadership realignment due to procedural inconsistencies. 3 dry paragraphs no one believed. Bloomberg and Reuters picked up whispers. Unexplained payouts. Delayed filings. A triggered continuity clause. His LinkedIn updated to open to opportunities within days. The board summoned me Wednesday, not for apology, but over bottled water in the same glass-walled room. They asked if I'd oversee interim restructuring as consultant and steward. I declined the title, the office, the meetings. What I offered instead were the 3 color-coded binders, step-by-step restoration plans, nothing ego-driven. Just architecture for stability. This doesn't fix culture overnight, I said, sliding them across. But it halts the damage. Start cauterizing Thursday. They nodded solemnly. I signed the last page with the same silver pen, neat and unadorned, then left it behind. The revised policies rolled out, mandatory full-clause reviews, multiple sign-offs, restored redundancies. Some called it overkill. Insiders called it necessary insurance. Quietly, across departments, Clause 12B earned a nickname, the Voss Safeguard. I never returned full-time. From my Evanston home, I watched the company stabilize, filings corrected, controls reinstated, trust slowly rebuilt. The stock recovered. Analysts returned. But the energy shifted. People read documents more carefully. Footnotes mattered again. Driving up to the Wisconsin cabin that weekend, windows down, the lake air crisp, I felt no triumph, only quiet balance. The ledger evened. Ryan had dismissed the quiet architecture as friction. In the end, that architecture held when charisma failed. What lingered most was the moral weight, how easily disruption becomes destruction when details are ignored. How power, handed carelessly, reveals character. How the patient, precise hand that built the walls can also invoke them when needed. I never sought credit. Peace, earned brick by brick through decades of diligence, outweighed any title. Yet somewhere in the corporate memory, the lesson remained: never underestimate the person who writes and enforces the fine print. Months later, the boardroom felt unchanged, same skyline view, same expensive but uncomfortable chairs, Yet the atmosphere had sharpened. Everyone waited silently as I entered, placing the laminated clause before the chairman. "This was the safeguard you overlooked," I said. "The one dismissed as irrelevant. It saved the integrity." No arguments. Faces that once passed me unnoticed in elevators now regarded me with accountability. I adjourned the session myself, walking out with the click of heels echoing alone. No further questions. No handshakes needed. In the hallway, PR attempted to intercept, but I raised a hand and continued. Their sanitized narratives didn't matter. The clause had already spoken. Outside, sunlight broke through clouds like a measured verdict. No smile crossed my face, but inside came that final internal balance, the ledger closing cleanly. The company issued stronger policies. Clause 12B became quietly legendary, referred to in hushed tones as the safeguard that reminded everyone why details endure. I stayed away, content in retirement, occasionally checking filings for my study. The story leaves this question, in our rush for speed and disruption. How many safeguards do we dismiss as relics, only to discover too late that the quiet ones who built them still hold the final authority? Ryan learned the hard way that fine print isn't friction, it's the foundation. And foundations, when properly laid, outlast any single leader's vision.